Hey, in this short lecture, I want to talk to you about types of listening responses. So, as we've already discussed in the previous short lectures from this chapter, responding is one of the key elements in the listening process and is really important in terms of effective communication and lasting relationships. And one of the primary ways in which we respond is what's known as prompting. And with prompting, we use silences and brief statements of encouragement to get people to continue talking, to draw them out, and to have them clarify their thoughts or their feelings. We do this all the time. So you might be listening to someone and you say, yeah, yeah, right? Those are prompts. Those are brief statements of encouragement that tell the other person, hey, I'm listening to you, keep going, keep talking. Another form of prompting that we can do is questioning. And this is where you just ask for information that can be helpful to both the listener, right? You as a listener, it can help you understand what the other person's trying to say. And can also help the speaker because it helps them to clarify their own thoughts and their own message. Now, there are two kinds of questions, of course, or two categories of questions. And one is better than the other when it comes to effective relationships and effective listening. So sincere questions are good questions. They're the ones that are aimed at increasing understandings. So this is, when you ask a sincere question, you really want to know what the other person is trying to say. Now, a counterfeit question is a question that's not really an attempt to clarify, a message, as much as it is a message in and of itself, right? So I'll give you, there are lots of examples in the next couple of slides, but I'll give you an example now. I'll have a student come up to me and say, I don't really feel like I have to study hard for this final exam. I think I've got it. And I might say something like, are you sure you don't want to study for that exam? Right? When I ask that question, that's a counterfeit question. I don't really expect him to answer that or her to answer that. I'm trying to send a message, which is, no, you really probably should study for the exam. So there are, of course, a whole bunch of different kinds of counterfeit questions. There are, for example, counterfeit questions that trap the speaker. These are ones like my mom used to ask me sometimes, right? You didn't like your food, did you? Now, that's a trick question because the answer is already in it, right? Everything that comes before that comma, you didn't like your food, right? That answers the question in and of itself, right? Then there are also things known as tag questions. I just did one there, actually. Tag questions are questions that we sort of tack on to the end of sentences that are asked when you're just looking for agreement, that you're trying to make sure that other people understand. And unfortunately, I do this a lot. I have a tendency to add the word right as a question at the end of my sentences as I'm lecturing. And what I'm doing there is I'm looking for agreement. I'm looking for students to indicate, yeah, Eric, we understand. We get you. And unfortunately, that's a form of disempowering speech, which is, in public speaking, something that we try to avoid because it makes it seem like you don't know what you're talking about. Then, of course, there are questions that make statements. That's like the example I gave you earlier with the student suggesting that he or she wasn't going to study. So a question that makes a statement, another example might be, are you ever going to clean your room? Right? When you ask someone that question, you're not really looking for them to answer the question as much as you are making a statement, which is you never clean your room and you need to. Excuse me. And of course, there are sometimes counterfeit questions that are questions that carry hidden agendas. So we're all familiar probably with the "Are you doing anything Saturday?" question. This can be a dangerous one, right? Maybe your buddy's asking you this question: "Are you doing anything on Saturday?" And that could mean that they want to go play golf or go day drinking or something fun. But it could also mean like, "Are you doing anything on Saturday?" No. Okay, cool. Bring your pickup truck and you can help me move. Right? We've all been caught by these questions that carry hidden agendas. Then sometimes there are questions that seek correct, in scare quotes, answers. Questions where the person asks a question, but they already know what they want to hear. Right? The classic, do these jeans make me look fat? No, of course not. That's the answer. That's always the answer to that question. Then we have questions that are based on unchecked assumptions. Why aren't you listening to me? We call that an unchecked assumption because it assumes that the other person is not listening to you, and they might be, right? Now, one way that we can try and clarify what other people are saying and respond to them is in what we call paraphrasing. And when you're paraphrasing, you're restating what the other person said or what you think they said in your own words. And we do this in order to make sure that we get it, right? That we get the message the other person's trying to say. Now, to paraphrase effectively, we have to rephrase what they're saying in our own words. You just can't repeat word for word what the other person is saying. Now, this paraphrasing can be factually based, right? So you're telling me that in 1492, right, or personally based. So what you're saying is you don't like it when I, right? So these are various examples of how we can paraphrase based on the content of what is being said, right? And when we paraphrase personal statements, right, it can help both parties, both the speaker and the listener, clarify the issues at hand in non-judgmental ways, right? So if someone's upset with you, one of the best tactics is paraphrasing. So if someone's upset with you, you can rephrase their message to make sure that you understand. And if you do it honestly and earnestly, if you do it in a way that shows that you really care what they're upset about, then this can help them clarify why they're upset and help you understand at the same time. Now, there are three sort of key ways to paraphrase. The first one is just changing the speaker's wording, right? So that's when you just rephrase it in your own words. The second manner is offering an example of what the speaker is discussing. So that's when you throw something out there. So what you're saying is it's kind of like when someone does that, what you're doing is you're giving an example to help clarify what they're saying. And then you can also paraphrase in a way that reflects the underlying theme, right? So that's if someone asks you a counterfeit question, for example, are you ever going to clean your room? You could rephrase that in a way that deals with the underlying theme. So you could say, so you're upset that I don't clean my room often enough, right? So that's an example of sort of paraphrasing in a manner that reflects the underlying theme. So again, to cover each one of these in a little bit more detail. An example, so changing the wording. So the speaker says, the only reason to go to college is to get a diploma so you can get a good job. You might paraphrase this by changing the wording and say, so you think colleges and universities should focus on preparing students for future employment, right? You see how that works, right? An example of paraphrasing and offering an example. So someone could say, Erik is the worst professor. And you could paraphrase that as saying, well, you think you should have graded our test more leniently, huh? Right? Or someone might say, fall is my favorite time of the year. And you could say, yeah, I love it when the leaves change colors. Right? These are ways of offering examples, right? Erik could have done this to be a better teacher, or this is what's so cool about fall, right? So in other words, this is a way of making sure that you understand what they're saying. And then again, you can reflect a theme. So someone might tell you, I hate how the school seems to shut down on the weekends, right? The gym closes early, dining halls only open a little bit, right? And so you could paraphrase that as saying, it would be great if there were more social activities and places to go on campus on weekends, wouldn't it? Right? So again, what you're doing there is you're paraphrasing, you're putting what they're saying into your own words in a way that strikes right at the theme of what they're trying to say. You're trying to get to that meaning, right? What they mean and your understanding of what they mean. Now, another form of responding is supporting. And when we're performing supporting, we're showing that we're expressing solidarity, right? So I'm with you, right? You're telling the speaker, I'm with you and I understand your situation. So this could be done to empathize. Yeah, I can understand why you're tired after all that work, right? That's a form of supporting that's all about empathizing, right? It's about empathy. Then there's another form of supporting that has to do with agreement. You're right, I think he's into you, right? Then there's supporting where you offer to help. I can help you with that if you want, right? Supporting where you offer praise. Man, you did a great job on that presentation. Or supporting through reassurance. Don't worry, man, you got this. You're all over it, right? These are all different forms of supporting responding statements. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times we deny other people's support. And oftentimes we don't even realize that we're doing it, right? So one of the ways we do this is we deny other people the right to their feelings. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. It's just a quiz. Why are you so worried about it, right? And this, of course, is very similar to minimizing the situation, right? It's just a class. Why are you making such a big deal out of it, right? So you see how these two are related, but slightly different, right? You shouldn't worry about it is slightly different than minimizing the situation, although they could be related, right? Then you can focus on the then and there instead of the here and now. This is something that people did to me all the time when I was growing up. In 5 years, you won't even remember his name, right? I promise you, this won't seem like a big deal to you when you get older, right? Now, this is really just a way of discounting how you're feeling, and it's upsetting, right? People used to tell me those kinds of things all the time, and I can remember being the kind of person that I am, thinking, "Oh, you're so wrong. I'm totally going to remember this shit in 20 years," and sometimes I did, by the way. Then we could also cast judgment. Oh man, you brought this on yourself. This is a way of denying support. Focusing on yourself, being a conversational narcissist. I know, girl. Let me tell you what happened to me, right? So again, you're stage hogging when you're focusing on yourself, or defending yourself, even sometimes when it might not be reasonable. Don't look at me. I didn't do it, right? So these are all forms again of denying other people support. So how do we provide effective support? Well, the first thing is we can support people's struggle even if we don't support their decisions, right? So maybe you don't approve of the action someone's taking. Maybe your friend is pregnant, not married, poor, and decides to get an abortion, but you're against abortion. Okay, you could be against their decision, but you can still support their struggle. Listen, I know this is really hard for you. I get it. I'm there for you. I understand, right? Then you also want to monitor their reaction to your supportive statements. Is it working? A lot of times you can offer people supportive responses and it just doesn't get through. So it's important to take stock of what you're saying and its effects. Then realize also that support isn't always welcome, right? Sometimes people don't want to hear anything. They just want to complain. This is something maybe I've said before, but it took me about 15 years of marriage before I realized that when my wife came home from work upset sometimes, that it wasn't my job to respond to it as much as it was just to listen, right? And she would tell me, Eric, I just want someone to listen. And I'd think to myself, what good does that do, right? But in reality, people feel better oftentimes just if they think that people are listening to them. And then finally, make sure you're ready for the consequences of your support. We offer support to people oftentimes, and I'm always here for you. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm here for you. But then, when you get that phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning and it's a disaster, we don't want it. So you have to sort of measure your support and figure out how far are you really willing to go before you extend it. Now, another important form of response is analyzing. And with analyzing, we're offering an interpretation of the speaker's message, right? So someone might tell us something, and we'll say, well, I think what's really bothering you is this. Or we'll say to someone, you don't mean that. Now, when we perform this kind of analyzing, we have to be careful because maybe they do really mean it, right? And so as a result, when people share their problems, right, we need to consider alternate meanings, right? We need to consider that maybe this really is how they're feeling, right? So some guidelines for analyzing. Offer your interpretation of what they're saying as a suggestion, right, rather than a fact. So you don't say, you don't really mean that, right? Instead you say, maybe what you mean is this, right? And that subtle difference in phrasing can really help to create a more positive communication environment. Be sure the person can handle the analysis, right? It's tempting someone sometimes to tell someone, what your problem is, and that's not always useful. And then make sure you're really trying to help too, because sometimes we offer support just because we take joy in other people's misfortune, and unfortunately that's just part of being a person, but it's something we have to look out for. Then there's advising, and advising is where we offer solutions to speakers' problems and some guidelines for this. Make sure your advice is wanted and that people really do want to listen to you. Make sure you understand all the facts of the situation before you start offering opinions. Don't offer advice if you don't know what you're talking about. If you're being offered advice, make sure that it's coming from someone you trust. And make sure that the advice this person is offering is offered in a sensitive manner, right? And the same way, the other way around. If you're going to offer someone advice, make sure you do it in a way that doesn't embarrass them or hurt their feelings. Then finally, of course, another form of responding is in judging. And with judging, we're offering a response that evaluates the speaker's thoughts or behavior in some way. So sometimes this is positive. You're absolutely right, right? Although more often than not, it's negative. You're never going to make it with that attitude, right? Now, judgment as a form of responding has the best chance of being received well when you do two things, right? Or when you're sure of two things. That the person has requested an evaluation from you, that they really want your judgment, and two, that your judgment is genuinely constructive and it's not supposed to be a put down. All right, so that's it for this unit, and next time we'll talk about choosing the best response.